And welcome back to Spiritual Strength. Today we have a very special guest, the owner, the founder of Romanitas Press, Louis Tofari. Louis, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome, Gene. Good to be here.
Absolutely, real pleasure having you on the show. I'm a big Catholic books fan, as I know a lot of our listeners are. I got a lot of these books here, and I'm telling you what, this is just the beginning of it right here. Saint Joseph, symbols of the Church. We got Catholic liturgy, Holy Week commentary, and on the cusp of getting another 10 or 15 books. So thank you for all that you do. It's
Great.
great stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Gene.
What when did you start? When did you start this? And what was your inspiration? What's your main mission?
So, Romanitas Press started, in a sense, unofficially as early as 2008. The first production item was actually my server's mass responses card, which is it's actually very unique. It's the only one of its kind. It's a fold-out card and it has all the Latin responses for the acolyte at the traditional mass. But the backside has a bunch of training stuff in there as well, phonetics and stuff. It's also the only card that exists that has what's called the More Romano pronunciation phonetics. So this is the official liturgical Latin pronunciation. Did a lot of research into that matter. In fact, I just announced I'm doing a Latin responses webinar here in October, which you can find information on the website. So literally, it's a turnkey program. I spent 12 days working with the servers. The live video, it's a live session like we're doing right now. And it consists of a presentation with slides and stuff, and then practicing the different responses, going through what the responses mean, their history, their spirituality, go through as well the gestures and references that are made with those responses. I have them do homework assignments, like even look things up in the Bible, look things up in the Missal. And then we have a coaching certification process that occurs as well. So they get a nice little certificate when they're done and they pass my class. So they not only learn how to properly pronounce the liturgical Latin, but they learn so much more that goes with that as well. And some of my background with this, Gene, is also training. So I started working with altar servers in an official capacity, you might say, back in 1996, when I helped to introduce the Archconfraternity of St. Stephen into this country, which came originally from England, London. Dates back to 1905, being approved by Pope St. Pius X himself. And so I've been involved in different publications, but like I said, that was my first real publication was in 2008. Then I followed up with some other things. In 2016, I was able to launch Romanitas Press as a business officially, so to speak, full time. And so we've just since then expanded. And under the umbrella of Romanitas Press, not just doing Catholic publishing, so obviously mainly geared or focused towards the traditional Catholic liturgy. First and foremost, with rubrics and training materials for the clergy, for the servers, for everyone else who's involved in the sacred liturgy, the sacred arts as well, but also other things too, the spirituality of the traditional liturgy and other things that are not necessarily strictly liturgical. I mean, we have something called a Roman Catholic drill book, which is a reprint of Christian doctrine drills from 1925 from the Archdiocese of Chicago. Little drill book my wife had used when she was a kid. I'm from Chicago. I'd never seen this little pocket book, and I was like, this looks great. So let's reprint this. Let's bring this back. So we're doing a lot of other things, but also under the umbrella of Romanitas Press, in addition to publications, different materials and stuff. I also offer training and consulting. So literally, I will fly to a place, train altar servers, train clergy how to learn how to celebrate traditional mass. That I even have a webinar for that I've done before in the past. So I do a lot of different things like that. Also, I do ecclesiastical design or architecture, liturgical architecture, and I have a rather unique approach to that, which is basically trying to implement the best qualities that you saw advocated by like the liturgical arts movement that started in the late 19th century, went through into the 20th century, and unfortunately fizzled out once we got into the post-conciliar period. But anyway, so I do a little of everything under one umbrella in that respect with Romanitas Press. So the name's a little deceiving because people say, well, you're a publishing company. What do you mean you're doing architectural design? And they're like, yeah, well, it's under the same name, you know.
Absolutely. And actually, with funny moment, that thing that just popped up kind of organically. I know I've said Romanitas before, but when I introduced you, I said Romanitas. So
Oh yeah.
because our Latin, not being trained myself, that actually demonstrates the need of a service like yours. Whereas I've learned more and more about tradition, our faith, and the Latin, where the Latin's inconsistent, where, even praying the Hail Mary, sometimes I'm saying gratia plena, sometimes I'm saying gratia plena, and it's like, well, what actually is it? And it's obviously our faith is more than just getting every single word right, but we're trying to give our best to God. We're trying to do our very best in being attached to our beautiful tradition. So there's right there is actually providential that I messed it up right away, displaying the need for your services.
Well, thank you. And to that respect, one of the things that I heavily focused on is the proper pronunciation of liturgical Latin. I have a book called Common Latin Prayers with interlinear phonetics. So these are phonetics I actually partially developed to help people to learn the proper pronunciation of Latin more quickly, more effectively, because a lot of people get intimidated because they're like, well, I don't know how to pronounce Latin. And so this has like all the prayers of the rosary, plus like prayers for meals and some other stuff as well. So it's basically a family prayer book, but we also promote it for parishes. Luckily right now with Pope Leo the 14th from Chicagoland. Okay, I know he's a White Sox fan, not a Cubbies fan, but we finally made it to the playoffs with Cubbies, miraculously. He is now kind of initiating a resurgence in Latin through his actions that he's been doing. From his first moment of stepping up on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to give his Urbi et Orbi blessing. I was watching that closely, and I was like amazed at his proficiency of pronunciation. It was so good. And it wasn't like the Americanized Latin I was expecting from someone like him at all. And so we have common Latin prayers as an example there for the family, for the parishes to help bring back, you might say, a renaissance of Latin amongst Catholics, because that is our patrimony. And many popes have written about the importance of Latin in the use by Roman Catholics, not just in the liturgy, but even within the home. And this, in fact, was very, very common with Catholics. And by the way, even our illiterate ancestors of the Middle Ages, they might not have been able to read and write, but they did know some Latin. There's evidence of this, that people think that, oh, they just stood in the church during the Latin liturgy and they were completely oblivious. No, when we have this tendency in America, unfortunately, that it's one language, that's it, and that's not the case in Europe. That's not the case in during the Middle Ages, where people often spoke two, maybe even three different languages. It was very, very common. So just because you can't read and write doesn't mean you can't learn a second or third language, especially if you're hearing it all the time.
Right.
You need it for your livelihood. But anyways, so trying to bring about a renewal in people learning their liturgical Latin. We also have another book that we did, a Latin guide for priests. It also includes all the other ministers in a traditional mass, whether it's deacon, subdeacon, elector, and acolyte, and even the choir or the schola. And it's the first of its kind because it has all of the prayers in phonetics that the priest uses, as well as those other guys. And it even includes it's like a sample set of propers from the Mass of the Most Holy Trinity and a bunch of other stuff. It's the most comprehensive Latin guide for the Latin liturgy, obviously traditional Mass, but also could even be used by priests in a Novus Ordo. But it's the most comprehensive of its kind. It does that, and it's the only, as far as I'm aware, it's the only of its kind it's ever existed in this type of format as well. So there's a heavy emphasis. Romanitas means to be Roman. That's what it means. And so one of the things I want to push is Romanity, you might say, or Romanitas in the liturgy, in the home, in our regular daily lives, to be Romans, to be Romans, to be Romans. And in fact, it's being Roman that defines our Western civilization, defines our Western culture, defines Christendom. Um, there was from your area, Gene, there was a Jesuit priest, Father Vincent Michelli. He's been passed away now for a few years, but he was well known in the 80s, especially. Lots of tape cassettes from Keep the Faith that exist out there on the Eastern Seaboard. But he gave a conference once on the Antichrist. Very well done conference. He actually wrote a famous book of the Antichrist. In our book, he wrote that people know Ungodly Rage, which is about feminism. Okay, the rise of feminism. It was a well-known book once upon a time. Father Vincent Michelli, Ungodly Rage. You can probably find it secondhand on Amazon. It's he's addressing these issues very, I say very early on, but for the 80s, I mean, it's good to go back to that stuff again to see what was going on in the beginning. But anyways, his book, The Antichrist, and then he gave a conference. And then during this conference, he makes a really important distinction about what the Antichrist will be, what he will not be. He goes against some of the Protestant myths that unfortunately infiltrated into Catholicism about the Antichrist, etc. He really goes back to the church fathers and Holy Scripture, Jewish tradition, and say, this is what we do know about the Antichrist and what is going to possibly happen. But one of the telling statements he makes is, he says, you'll start to know when the time of the Antichrist is truly coming, when you start seeing, he didn't use the word Romanitas in particular, but he said, when you start to see Roman culture disappear from Western civilization, that is when you know, because that is what binds us together. That is the glue. It is our mindset, it's our law, it's our practice, it's just our way of life. And by the way, Gene, I like to point out to, especially to our fellow Americans here, my fellow Americans, we are actually far more Roman than we think. For instance, we Americans have a great preoccupation, or at least used to, like with the law. This is why we have a lot of shows like Perry Mason, Law and Order, and all these that deal with law in the courtroom and all that. And our fellow cousins, the British, are exactly the same way. They're very, very intent on law. That is part of that Roman mindset of jurisprudence. Okay?
Exactly. Going back even before Christ, that was baptized at the church, right?
Correct. And in fact, so the God takes the apparatus of the Roman Empire, as corrupt as it might be, but yet there's many very good things about it as well. And he uses that to rapidly spread Christianity throughout the entire Roman world, Mediterranean basin, Asian Minor, and everything. And the church adopts all the best things
Right.
of Rome, from her language, which she then actually continues to develop up until the Middle Ages, from her sense of law, her very laws itself, even her architecture. Also, we Americans are very practical in our mindset. Romans are practical, practical, practical. They do things because it's practical or makes sense, logic, you might say. We Americans share those traits. That's why we Americans are the best when it comes to mass production. So for better or for worse, mass production could be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. Okay. It's not the craftsmanship mentality you might see in old world Germany, for example. But, at the same time, it is a product of the American sense of ingenuity, which is also very Roman. So anyways, at Romanitas Press, we're striving to encourage people to get back to their Roman Catholic roots in one way, whether it's the language, whether it's the liturgy, whether it's other ways of thinking about our faith. So that's what we're trying to do.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And Catholic meaning universal. And, immediately I think back to the Tower of Babel, that God confounded, split all their languages. That was a punishment because they were all of one language, right? That was my understanding in the Old Testament times, but before the Tower of Babel in Genesis, right? They were all one. So and then with the church, that would be obviously what fulfills that, where now everyone is being brought back together in Christ, in the church. And that would be
Precisely.
Romanitas.
I mean, imagine you're in Europe, especially even medieval Europe, where there were even more dialects that existed back then, and yet you could step into any Catholic church and you're at home, at least linguistically, because it's Latin. You know the Gloria, you know the Kyrie, you know the Sanctus. It's even if there's different changes, before the Council of Trent, for instance, that from church to church. But the fact is, you could walk in and you were comfortable. Same way, I mean, Catholics, American Catholics used to have that sense of comfort, before Vatican II when they started going to the vernacular. And I'm not against the vernacular per se, but there's something about the unifying nature of Latin. They would walk into any church in France. You'd walk into Notre Dame in Paris. It's Latin. It's not in French. I understand the liturgy. I know exactly where we're at. I know what's going on. I don't have to sit and try. And by the way, it's important to understand too, the enemies of the church, they understood very well the intrinsic value of the unifying nature of the Latin language in the church. And there's one of the reasons they wanted to destroy those bonds by, trying to diminish the use of Latin as much as possible. And like, again, once again, the vernacular in itself is not a problem, but if it gets overly done, that is the case, unfortunately, today. In fact, to point out, Sacrosancta Concilium Vatican II,
I was just going to say,
the document on liturgy actually says Latin
going
and
for
the
Latin.
Gloria Chat are to have pride of
Pride of
place. The
place.
Council Fathers had no concept whatsoever that Latin would just be wholesale replaced by the vernacular.
Right.
In that respect. So in any case, Pope Leo is definitely giving the signs. He just recently, last week, he kind of said, "Hey, you want to do Latin? Go for it." Okay. And that's good. I think it was wonderful and heartening to see him announce the Regina Coeli in the square, just a
Yeah.
couple days after his election as Pope. But what was a little disappointing was, if you're watching it, it's not the thunderous union of people joining him. Yeah, you could hear people, but it's not like the time of Pope Pius
Scattered.
XII, when there's, well, first thing, those crowds were much larger anyways, to be honest. But the other thing is, they all knew the Regina Coeli. Now, it's good that there were some that did. But I make an appeal, by the way, to pastors of churches. I make an appeal to fathers of families. Can you pray in Latin with Pope Leo, our Holy Father, the Pope? Can you pray with him? Well, if you can't, get one of my books. Start the journey.
Right.
In fact, one of the things we're trying to do to develop next, I told you I have a Latin webinar for servers. I actually have one for choirs as well, but I'm trying to do one just for the faithful, where we go just through the prayers of the rosary, because you can give them a book in phonetics, but sometimes that's not even enough. They need to hear it, or they need to practice it. They need some coaching. So that's something I eagerly want to do, is like, I want to, like you, Gene, I want to be their personal trainer for the
Right.
pronunciation of Latin. Okay. We're gonna get all worked up here about the Latin. So, and then hopefully people, because they have greater confidence in doing it correctly, they're not going to be shy or timid about trying to do it. Because I know that
Right.
that is a factor sometimes.
Right. But we are seeing it more and more. Of course, more and more people going to the Latin Mass. I see more and more people trying to pray at least the basic prayers in Latin. And then also another phenomena you see is more Novus Ordos in Latin, or if it's not just in Latin,
Right.
incorporation of more Latin by the priests. So again, it is a great unifier. And if we're going to do it, we want to do it right.
And I would say, again, one of the key elements to restoring the sense of the sacred of the liturgy is bringing back the sacred tongue. A term that some like to use regarding the use of Latin in our liturgy is hieratic language. Hieratic is a fancy word. It means something that's formal, solemn, or it's reserved for a special function. And by the way, I should mention the Latin we use in our liturgy, in the Roman Mass. There's actually 3 types of Latin are used, but it is not the Latin, as is commonly said by people. It was not the Latin that was used on the street. It was a very
Right.
formalized type of Latin that was used, especially the Italivetus, which means the older Italian or Latin. It's referring to the Italian continent, peninsula. Um, that Italivetus was the formal type of Latin that was reserved for the most important functions of the Roman state. And it's very it's got a very beautiful flow and rhythm to it. And we use that for example, the canon of the Mass. It's used for some of the ordinary of the Mass parts. And the church took that form or style over and baptized it for her use in the sacred liturgy. The other type of Latin we'll use is what's called the Vulgare, or as you know, the Vulgate Latin. This, of course, vulgare doesn't just mean vulgar, it means the common Latin, meaning the common Latin that was taught academically. So we go to school, we learn what proper English is. That doesn't mean we take it out on the street and that's what we use it, okay? But that is the language that St. Jerome is using for his improved translation of sacred scripture. And by the way, if you ever look at, especially if you go to traditional Roman Mass, you'll notice when you compare the Latin of the canon of the Mass compared to like an epistle you'll notice, wait a minute, it doesn't have that same flow. That's because you have two different types or styles of Latin being used. And the last one is called the classicusus, or the classical style of Latin that you've seen from Cicero and Seneca and those kind of guys. That's more used like in the breviary, that the divine office that the priest will use for some of the hymns and stuff. Though you do see it, like for instance on the feast of Corpus Christi, we have a sequence, the famous sequence Laude Sion Salvatorem, which St. Thomas Aquinas wrote. And St. Thomas Aquinas is this genius, and of course, they taught classical Latin during the medieval period as well. So classical Latin has a different meter or rhythm as well as different vocabulary. So imagine our English today compared to Shakespeare's English. That's kind of the difference you're seeing between classical and modern day English, okay? Ecclesiastical Latin, I should say, liturgical Latin, Italivetus. And so you'll see that in the hymn where he'll pull out all the stops using the vocabulary that isn't commonly used in liturgical Latin, but was used amongst the more early Latin writers or orators of the Roman Empire. But anyways, I get off on a little tangent there. But anyways, it's a fascinating topic. I cover some of these points in the various books or sources that I have. I think, again, the whole Latin thing is it's just really cool, just one way or the other. And it's not difficult to learn. You don't have to be 100% fluent in Latin to be able to attend Mass in Latin. It is kind of a learning experience. But I could tell you, if you're used to like hearing especially like the Gospels in Latin, and you're following it in your missal, after about a year or two, you could almost close your missal and say, oh, it's that parable of the gospel.
Yep. I could verify that. Yep.
It's really, and people could do things, from opening your missal the night before you go to Sunday Mass and reviewing the prayers in Latin and beginning to understand and become a little more familiar with the vocabulary. There's great courses out there for learning. One of the best immersion courses out there, I did not produce this. It's called Little Latin Readers, and it focuses on ecclesiastical liturgical Latin. It has some of the also early ancient Roman Latin as well, but it's one of the best immersion courses exist out there. It includes the recordings as well as workbooks and everything. And so for people who want to become more fluent in Latin or more appreciative of Latin, they can certainly do something down in your own free time. And I think, in this rebuilding process of Catholicism,
right,
to gain back our hallmarks of Roman Catholicism, it's going to take a little extra effort.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, in your typical parochial diocesan setting, this isn't being given yet. Yeah, like you said, Gene, there are definitely efforts to bring some of this back,
but not enough.
Right. And it's going to take the lay people to swing it. Fulton Sheen used to say, if the lay people ask for it, the clergy will do it.
Right. Right. And it's just the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And we do need to be aware of it and why it's important. And, what it got me thinking about, it. I used to watch a lot of Father Ripperger videos, and he said, well, one of the things he said about the value of Latin? I remembered it by the helpful mnemonic, or the acronym TUS, like John Paul II's was totus tuus, totally yours. Well,
Yes.
TUUS. Well, it was that tradition. It's the Latin is the part of our tradition. It's unchangeable, or it's unchanging, so that locks the meaning in place, so people don't play with words. It's a uniformity. It's universal. The other U, and then S is it's a sacred language. It's one of the three languages that was nailed to the cross of Christ, which was for our redemption. And the exorcists report that the demons hate Latin, and all things being equal, the prayers are a little bit more efficacious in Latin. So when I think about all that, I say, well, I do want to pray. At very least, I want to start praying my rosary in Latin. Like, that's what pushed me over the top. So, and it's not that hard. It's not that hard to learn. It's funny because a lot of people talk a big game. They act really tough when it comes to a lot of things. Two different areas I see people not talking tough is when it comes to having more children. A lot of men start wimping out. Oh, I'm done. I can't have any more. That's receiving a lot of the toughest people. They start wimping out. Or where it comes to something like learning something new, like that's going to take a little bit more time in our instant society. Oh, let's learn it. Let's learn Latin. Oh, I can never do that. These hard men who are acting tough when it comes to children or maybe learning something. Hey, it's not over. It's not overnight. Grow a pair. Get tough.
Yeah,
Have
I would
a can of
address
man.
yeah, exactly. And I would address another mindset. Uh, it's so funny in this day and age, we think we're so modern and so up with things and so smart and intelligent, and we really reached the apex of our natural evolution. Okay. And
All
yet
that.
we can't bring ourselves to learn a second language like
Exactly.
Latin, which has been used. And this funny, I attended many, many years ago a conference that was given, and the professor who was promoting basically an immersion Latin program. He said, we got to get back to where Latin isn't just grammatically dissected, which is the way, unfortunately, Catholics in America were pretty much typically taught Latin for decades. In fact, that was one of the motivations behind the foundress of Little Latin Readers, because she was sick and tired of Latin courses that just focused on, well, how do you dissect? How do you decline? How do you conjugate? I want to learn to actually speak it. I want to learn to actually read it. And this professor, what he said was, if you consider what our Latin literary legacy is, he says, we have this much, whoops, let me go this way, this much in Latin on the library shelf, and we have this much in English.
Yes.
He says, if you want to read the Church Fathers, if you want to read the ancient Romans, if you want to read the Middle Ages, if you want to read, he said that all you have to do is be able to. Anyways, the point of the matter is, I love it how we say, oh, we're so smart, and yet it's like, yeah, but compared to our illiterate ancestors, we're kind of stupid. I mean, we don't. I mean, I can even say that about myself. It's like I know about harvest seasons and stuff like that, but if you asked me about the phases of the moon, that's something I really didn't learn that much, was astronomy. But yet what? I can tell you, the medieval farmer, he knew all about it, because he needed to be able to plant his crops at a certain time, or he was going to die from starvation. Or he wasn't, those guys weren't stupid. And they, like I said, they usually spoke multiple languages, their own local dialect, whatever that might been. They had a smattering of Latin. I mean, it wasn't perfect. I mean, they weren't, illustrious doctors of the church or clerks writing in Latin, but they could probably go around and say, hey, they could go into another town somewhere, and they could probably they could actually do business. Okay. Right. They could actually do business if they had to in that language, and probably spoke another even language as well. I mean, even the apostles, we know, were speaking, in addition to Aramaic, they knew some Hebrew. We know they also knew Greek. Right. you know, so
These were not stupid
these
people.
are
It's not
fishermen from Galilee. I mean,
right.
these are fisher. I mean, think of the red hook, the red hicks from the Appalachian Mountains. That's what these guys were. Can any good come from Galilee?
Exactly. Exactly. No, it's true. And as you're saying this, I think of some of the, different people who were doing things going on. I think about one of the podcast guy, Christian Wagner. One of the things he said was that if you're trying to get into theology and you don't know Latin, you're in the wrong profession. Basically, you're basically barking up the wrong tree, because pretty much 80% of our Catholic tradition, like you said with your hands, that it's in Latin. It's still not translated to English. So you're behind. Like if you're going to choose to study theology, maybe it's not for you if you're not going to learn Latin. So that was one thing I remember. And then another guy, William Michael, is Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and he does like homeschool groups, and he looked at Latin. He said this is a key that unlocks a door for the church, as well
Right.
as all of the literature, right? The Stoics, the Roman law, jurisprudence. Like this is going to open up an entire world to you. That it's a key that unlocks a door that otherwise it is not accessible, because a lot of it is still there, beautiful, important, but untranslated. And when you learn Latin, you have that key that
Exactly.
unlocks the door.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's a hallmark, and again, it's a hallmark of us as being Roman Catholics.
Yeah.
It just really is. And it used to be something very common where we learned, yes, we often pray the rosary in the vernacular. Okay, that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But we also learned it in Latin. We all learned the Ave. We all learned the Paternoster. We all learned the Gloria Patri. At least three basic prayers right there that I would suggest every Roman Catholic should know in Latin. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be. And of course that comprises our Holy Rosary as well. Something just to put it out there, with my family, we pray at least one decade of the Rosary in Latin. Okay. So and the we started doing that from an early age. And are my kids doing 100% perfect yet? No, but they're acquainted with it. And when we turn on the Latin, start doing the Ave Maria, oh, they know what that response is. It's not foreign to them. And even if they're having trouble still pronouncing it 100% correct sometimes, they're at least, acquainted with, oh, that's what that is. It's not like they have to sit there like like a muted spectator, like I have no idea how to respond. I don't know a single word of the Ave. Okay. Anyways, just to put it out there to families, it's not difficult to do. No, you don't have to speak Latin in your home. We're not, I mean, if you want to, you can, but I mean, but the point of the matter is a smattering of Latin goes a long ways.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like the saying that I've heard was when the church puts something down, society picks it up and does it differently. And not the church never put down Latin. Obviously, the church has always encouraged Latin, but if it's not being used as much, then society picks it up and does it. Like we still have that yearning in ourselves for what the church has provided or did provide. And then we pick it up in a different way. I think of like incense. When we stop using incense as much as church, now the secular world starts, people are going into these different, whatever hookah shop. They're looking for incense to burn, right? Because we have that need for the incense and the smoke. Like we have our five senses. And then I think about with the Latin language, okay, when a lot less Latin was taking place in the church, what started going on the rise? But people trying to speak in tongues. And that's a whole other issue that we could probably do. You could tune into Jeff Kastman's Welcome to Tradition to go into all that whole bag of worms. So shout out to him and what he's doing. I know you're a regular on his show, but
Him and Uncle Jimmy.
That's right. That's right. But that's right, Uncle Jimmy. But so that people, I think there's something about the mystery of having a mystery associated with language.
You just keyed in on something. It's interesting because one of the normal acts, a natural act of religion, true or false, is to cloak or clad our sacred religious things in another language that's different than what we normally use. So as example, originally, obviously, our Roman liturgy was in Greek because most of the converts were Greek in Rome, itself, but then eventually it became the Latin that we have. And like I said, it was not the Latin that was being used every single day. It was a very formalized type of Latin. But for instance, in other liturgical rites of the church, so in the Byzantine, they would use the more ancient form of Greek. It's not the Greek that's spoken today. In the Slavic churches, they used what was called Old Slavonic. It is not modern day Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, whatever. In the Egypt, they use Coptic, which is the actual language of the pharaohs.
Wow.
Okay. So examples there where they're using different languages. Obviously, Jews use Hebrew. The Muslims use Arabic, and it's a classical form of Arabic, by the way. It's not even the Arabic that's spoken today. Okay. The Hindus use Sanskrit. If you were to talk and as terrible as that religion is, it's a very demonic religion, but the priests, the Hindu priests will tell you, we no longer know what we're saying. We just know that this phonetic paragraph is used for this particular prayer. But they have actually admitted we don't even know what those words mean any longer. It's just we memorize that prayer text and we use it for this intention. Okay. So it's a natural thing to try.
Our human nature, we're yearning for that, to veil the sacred, right? We say why women wear veils and the tabernacle is veiled. We veil the sacred, having that language, right?
Right. People forget that even in our Lord's time, Hebrew is not the language spoken by the Jews. This is why he cries out from the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Okay. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is actually a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic.
Oh.
They were confused and said, let us see if Elijah returns. He wasn't saying Elijah. He was saying, oh Lord, Eli, Eli. So the Jews didn't even know their own Hebrew liturgical language 100% either, because they were confused to what our Lord was saying. And it's, by the way, why is there that mixture of Aramaic and Hebrew? That was common in our Lord's time, apparently, for them to do this. Anyways, that I don't want to get into academics here, but anyways, the thing is there's something very uplifting about the use of Latin and everything. And the thing is also, it is intelligible for people to say, well, I don't understand what's going on. Well, first thing, the Mass is a mystery. You're never going to totally understand the Mass. That's impossible. It's like trying to understand the Holy Trinity. And St. Augustine has that great example for us of the child trying to fill, put the ocean into the hole. It's like, that's impossible. You can't do that. Well, you can't understand the Holy Trinity either. So don't even try, the Mass is a mystery. We've lost a little bit of that sense to say we in our modern age, we think we have to understand absolutely everything. Everything has to be revealed or naked to us. Okay. And that's why we can't have any sense of the sacred. By the way, going into that, one of the big things I promote is veiling your tabernacles in fabric, which was in fact the liturgical law. And people, well, I want to see that tabernacle, or I want to see our Lord all the time. You're not meant to. The traditional approach to the Holy Eucharist was you only saw it once in a while. You only saw our Lord revealed naked once in a while. Okay, that was it. But the rest of it was you saw him through the veil of the mystery. Okay, and Latin presents a little bit of that veil of the mystery as well. It's like, but Latin is intelligible. Like I said, I tell people 85% of our English comes from Latin. It's not that hard.
Right. This is SAT prep. This doubles as SAT prep for your kids.
Exactly. I mean, look, you got to use your noggin. Okay, but the thing is too, like you said earlier, Gene, the Latin doesn't change. The Latin doesn't change. The Kyrie is going to be the Kyrie. The Gloria is going to be the Gloria. Et cum spiritu tuo is going to be et cum spiritu tuo. Dominus vobiscum, et cum spiritu tuo. It's unchanging. And by the way, there's something really comfortable about having it in this kind of language. It elevates everybody in the church. I can't explain it.
It's like having your mom's chicken. It's having your mom's chicken soup when you're not feeling great. That comfort food. It's a sense of belonging, not only being united with not only the Catholics now, but that have gone before us. right?
You are,
As
you are, it's like kneeling down at the communion rail where, your family's lineage or legacy is at. You know that your parents were kneeling at that communion rail, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your great aunts, your uncles, your cousins. I've had that experience before where the family church in Chicago, uh, this communion rail is still there, which is amazing. And I've seen pictures of my family in the church. And the first time I got to go and kneel down right at the communion rail and think, this is exactly where my ancestors knelt for Holy Communion. The link.
yeah,
It was just, and Latin does that. In fact, this is spoken about our lineage through
right.
this language, something as simple as language, going back all the centuries through all the different saints, whoever your saint is, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Teresa of Avila, okay, Pope Saint Gregory the Great, Pope Saint Damasus,
Yeah.
who starts this whole Latin thing, okay. It's this thread that's there that bind. It's kind of like the communion of the saints,
I
church
was just gonna. That's what I was
militant with
thinking.
church triumphant and church suffering.
Right. And it's not a surprise that the church really united everyone under that language, because that's exactly what it was about, the connectedness. And then my mind also thinks of G.K. Chesterton. I don't know which book it was of his, but saying about we're all about democracy, or we say we are, but giving the democracy of the dead, giving a voice to the most unlikely of people, and that's the dead, the people who've come before us, and that's all, uniting us all together. So it really is a beautiful thing. You feel a greater sense of connectedness, belonging, and again, knowing that this is very pleasing to God. And like you said, it's part of our English language anyway. We're taken from a lot from Latin,
Right.
so it's going to help you no matter what, and it's a beautiful thing. So why wouldn't you learn Latin? So I would say, other than you're just, hey, kind of wimping out here. I don't think I
Right.
could do it. Not very manly. Man up.
And to go circle back around, I know we've been like a
Yeah.
little focusing on the Latin, which is really important part of the work that I'm trying to do. But obviously, as you showed, a bunch of other
Yeah.
books as well. We're doing other
Oh
things,
yeah.
whether they're related directly to the liturgy or not. An example would be the Father Arthur
Got this
Tony
one here.
books that we have. Well, that's particularly that's Dom Gaspar Lefebvre, the great Benedictine liturgist of the 20th century. He's 100% reliable for orthodoxy and everything. And that book there is his masterpiece, Catholic Liturgy, Its Fundamental Principles. Another book
Back
that I
to Holy Week.
published by him is How to Understand the Mass, which is illustrated.
Yep.
That's another good one you've got there, Holy Week, which helps to really understand, um, prepare you for the great, profound supernatural rites of Holy Week, which is the apex of our salvific redemption by Jesus Christ. But like for instance, we have Father Arthur Tony that we're bringing back. He was a longtime priest in Pilsen, Kansas. If you guys are familiar with Father Emil Kapon, the Korean military chaplain, we are trying to get canonized. He wrote the first biography. That was actually Father Kapon's parish church, where he was a longtime pastor. Well, he wrote a series of books that were intended originally to be homily aids for priests, but the laity can read it. And we're up to our sixth volume. He did about maybe 30 to 40 um, in his lifetime, and we're very slowly bringing him back. As one Wichita diocesan priest said, he's our priest. He's our Fulton Sheen, um, meaning for the more when you get further to the Midwest. Of course, Fulton Sheen is from the Midwest. He's from El Paso, Illinois, south of where I'm from. But anyways, Father Tony is absolutely incredible in his witty explanations of how these things apply to us. He always uses a little story. Incredibly intelligent priest as well. I mean, he pulls out all these different. Every time I get another book from him, I'm just like, wow, just amazing how smart this guy is and what he's able to do with his books. So yeah, if you go up to our website, romanitaspress.com, you hover over the shop on the far left, it'll drop down, it'll say Father Tony, and you'll see what we have so far. We have more coming, by the way. We're in the process right now. It's our goal to reprint all of his books from the 40s and 50s.
Wow.
That's our goal to do that eventually. It's a long process because what we're doing is we're retypesetting all of them because they were basically mimeographed and they were
Yeah.
just coil bound. They weren't even most of those books were never done like in a hardcover. But a couple of them were done kind of as a paperback. But for the most part, they were just basically mimeographed, um, coil bound copies is what they were. So, but
Mhm.
Father Arthur Tony is one of those things we're trying to promote and bring back. He's so easy to understand, and it's just incredible. Like I said, how he takes these things from our religion, our Catholic religion, and he gives us a daily application for them through a story. Very, very accessible.
It
Um,
looks at yeah, and I realized that as it's funny as we're talking, I'm clicking through the website, loading the cart, loading the cart. I got over $100 worth of books already that are going to be coming. Thank God, my wife's supportive of all that too, so she's good with that. But yeah, I mean, it's really good, and I have the book, your book on the sacramentals also. I realize I'm like, yeah, because I
yes,
keep all my books sectioned off by topic, otherwise it gets
yes.
massively confusing. So I do have the book on the sacramentals as well. I have a book on it, I think on the St. Stephen Guild for altar boys, altar servers.
Yes, yes, the Archconfraternity St. Stephen Handbook, which I was the one that actually reproduced that all the way
Yep.
back in 1996. I retypeset it and put it back because it was out of print. So that was something I did. It's not an actual Romanitas Press
Okay.
production item, but it's something I distribute.
Okay.
Try to promote the guild, the serving guild for the altar servers, um, which is another one of my great passions is training altar servers and reforming altar servers. I mean, they're the lifeblood of our parish. They're your most important investment in your parish are your servers, whether they're men and boys, men and or
Priests.
boys.
Yep.
You're not only teaching them how to grow in holiness through serving the liturgy, which is an act of religion. So they have a public duty to the parish and the church at large, as well as to themselves to grow in sanctity. Obviously, serving can help them teach them how to become better young men. And I would go a step further that yes, it can inculcate vocations. That's not the main reason
That's
for
not the main point.
serving,
You just
but
talked about that, right? I think I just listened to you talk about that somewhere.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
but
that's right.
it's certainly an effect of serving.
Yes.
This is one of the points that the Archconfraternity St. Stephen makes is that one of the main impetus of the guild or objects of the guild is to sanctify the server. That's its number one objective is to sanctify the server. And it does that by teaching them what the ceremonies mean, as well as how to serve correctly according to the various liturgical authorities, so not just made up things. And in any case, also to understand that serving is a great religious privilege. And as one way they put it, it's the greatest thing that you can do as a layman is
Right.
to serve at the altar. So again, it puts that in. So that's something I'm very heavily involved with is training and forming altar servers as well as priests. So I have a whole plethora of stuff on rubrics and everything from my own ceremonial notes, a book, The General Principles Ceremonies of the Roman Rite that I actually authored. It's also one of a kind. And then other books, other reference books. We have more stuff coming publishing wise in the future, in the near future here. I'm always working on something else, trying to put together some training videos for servers. Priests, you're more than welcome to reach out and contact me. I have stuff for you as well. The regular parish. I mean, even if the parish wants to learn, well, how should we properly participate in Mass? What is the best and most ideal method to do this according to like St. Pius X, Pius XI, Pius XII? Well, I give conferences on this stuff. I've been trying to get to some articles and podcasts on this stuff, and you get so snowed under, as you know, Gene, that you just can't get to it. And when I want to do a podcast, I really wanted to do it in kind of more of in a professional way, kind of something that's like it's always out there for people. I have one out there right now of a conference I gave during a symposium several years ago. It's very long, so it might be kind of boorish. I try to also always do presentations, visuals when I do my stuff, because I know people learn through seeing. I mean, that's just the way we are in our
Yep.
culture today. But anyway, so doing a
Yep.
lot of different things, and if you go to my website, hide your wallet. But there are a ton of things up there available for free. Um, in fact, it makes my wife mad all the time because you're giving it away. You should be charging for that. Well, money isn't always everything. And
People buy more when you give away. So you want to put out that information. I get you. It's both. It works both ways. Like, yeah, there's going to be people who freeload, and that's great too. Like, we want to get it out there. People are more inclined to buy. If I'm seeing things I could click, then I start loading up the cart right after that.
there you go. Yeah, there you go. I mean, so we have other stuff, like I have articles up there that I've written or videos that I've done. Another thing I've done is a serialization of what's called the Peregrinus stories, Peregrinus Gasolinus, or Peregrinus Gasolinus means wandering gasoline or traveling gasoline. It's called Peregrinus Gasolinus, um, Wandering Notes on the Liturgy by Father Michael Chapman. He's deceased now. He was actually convert from Episcopalianism to Catholicism, and he was in the state of Indiana. Well, he wrote two books, Peregrinus books. They're like basically these really witty stories of these two priests. One is called the Antiquary, the other one is called the Liturgist, the liturgiologist. And the Antiquary and the liturgiologist like to travel around in their Model T or Tin Lizzie. Okay, so there's a lot of these old words or vocabulary phrases being used.
Okay.
They're written in the 20s and the 30s. And they're traveling around the United States, and then they go to Europe, and they're criticizing what they see or critiquing or commenting upon some of the liturgical practices, architectural practices, devotional practices that they see. So these are very witty stories about these two priests going around. And the concept was to try to improve what our practice of Catholicism was, whether it was architectural, liturgical, or devotional. But they go, but anyways, there's something up there, and we've transcribed all that and then added lots of footnotes to bring people up to date, because they'll mention something like, well, I put out the parking lantern. What the heck is a parking lantern? Well, and then I have to show you a picture. Well, back in the old days, before streets were lit by lights, and you parked on the side of the rural road, you would attach this to your car battery, and it would light up all night long to warn people your car was parked on the side of the road. We still have parking lights to this day, but we no longer use them that way.
Right.
In fact, almost nobody even knows how a parking light even works anymore. But it all goes back to the very early days when roads were not illuminated, and you might have to park your car overnight on the side of the street because people didn't have driveways. And so you would light up the side of the car so no one would run into it by accident.
Right.
So we have to
Right.
add all
Yep.
these, we have to add footnotes and everything
Exactly.
to bring people up to date. What is he referring to? Because a lot of this, but it's cool because, again, it's kind of that link to, I mean, this wasn't
Past,
that
yeah.
long ago in American history, in American culture, that this was commonly known stuff. And
Right.
well, anyways.
And then when you see that link, like, to kind of tie it back, to see that continuity with the past, how, oh, we do something now that's similar to that, but not quite that, and we see that continuity. There's like an aha moment or a comfort
Yeah.
that we feel, or an attachment to the past, and I think that's great. Everything you're doing, and just knowing a ton about history on your end. Anytime I listen to you speak, I always learn something new, and I start to
Thank you.
put little pieces together, and it gets exciting. So yeah, I hope our listeners will go. We'll check it out. Like I said, my shopping cart is loaded just as we speak, and I've plenty of your books already. So real
Great.
excited. Thanks, Lewis.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate. Where else do we send them for you?
Was that
Where-
RomanitasPress.com?
Okay, that's the
So
best
the
spot.
word Roman, ITAS, and then PRESS. So Romanitas, then the word press, all one word, pressed together.com.
Any other social media pages you want to get out?
We are on Facebook. And we are at LinkedIn as well. There is a YouTube channel, which we're very slowly starting to try to grow. Like I said, I've been trying to get back into, I was on a radio show for a while years ago, learning about the Roman liturgy at Magnificat Media, which unfortunately no longer exists. It was streaming radio. One of the things I've been trying to get into is doing regular podcasts, like once a week, where I speak from 10 to 20 minutes I have a very bad habit of speaking for a long time. There's an
Me
infamous
too. Me too.
Castman show where Jeff and I are speaking for almost 2 hours on Ember Days, which is this week in
This week, right?
September. So it's a fascinating history about the Ember Days, and there's so much to unpack about the Ember Days. It took a lot of time to go through it, but we kind of got off tangent as I usually do, me and Jeff. We started talking about some apologetics against Protestants in the middle of all that. So if you go to a Jeff Kastman show with me and Jeff, we do try to keep things tighter now, but the earlier shows, if they're running for an hour, you're going to get more than you paid for, so to speak, because there's so much there that Jeff and I end up talking about and going off tangent, and then we circle back to the wagons and say, okay, let's get back on topic here. But no, I'm trying to get back to podcasting on a regular basis to go through a lot of liturgical things. So just there's a whole plethora. I mean, you can never stop talking about the sacred
Right.
liturgy anyways. I always tell people, as by the way, don't let the liturgy be intimidating for you. You can never stop learning about the liturgy. I will never stop learning about the liturgy. It's just it's like this giant, it's this treasure chest you open up and you just keep taking out the coins and the jewels and the pearls, and it's just a bottomless treasure chest. You
Right.
will never stop emptying that chest. So people, I know a lot of people, especially I talk to men. Let me reach out to men. Men, I think it's so important that you become informed about the liturgy. It does not mean you need to become a liturgical expert. It means you should know the basics about the sacred liturgy, and that way you can give that to your family in some shape or form. Okay, women seem to be really good at this. Okay, they pick it up and they do stuff, and then with women especially, I really encourage when I see the women come up with arts and craft things for their kids to do that put them into sync with the liturgy. That's wonderful. And by the way, something as simple as decorating the Christmas tree, that is a liturgical practice. You might say that is bringing the liturgy into the home in a devotional way. People don't look at the Christmas tree as being devotional, but that's how it started for the German Catholics. Okay, because all those little baubles you put on your tree today, they used to originally be candied fruit or candies or stuff. And the idea was you would take some of that off of the tree during the octave of Christmas to remind you of the fruits of the graces that Christ, the newly born Redeemer incarnate, would give to us. That was the whole idea there. And the tree itself represents Christ pointing up to heaven. The evergreens, the fresh, wonderful smell, cleansing smell of Christ's sanctifying grace. There's all these things that go in. But anyways, you men. It's really easy to pick up a book on the liturgy. There's Dom Gaspar Lefebvre's, that green book I showed you. The reason why it's that green, by the way, not only because it's a Art Nouveau type cover, but I wanted it to stand out on your bookshelf. When you see that, you know what book that is.
Yeah.
That is simple, easy reading about the sacred liturgy. Another book, which I don't think you have in front of you, is How to Understand the Mass. That's more of a yellowish cover, but it's incredibly illustrated about the different parts of the Mass, showing how it's being fulfilled in sacred scripture, whether it was the Old Testament or what Christ himself did in the New Testament. Easy to understand. There's the Father Tony books. He's always going back to the liturgy. Those are easy to read. Guys, reading on the liturgy is not complicated, and you don't have to have a doctorate to be able to understand the basics and to give something to your children.
Right.
It's just like, heck, if you know anything about car mechanics, doesn't mean you're an expert at car mechanics or any kind of your favorite sport. You're not maybe an expert. Well, maybe you think you're an expert at sports, but that doesn't mean you are. Okay. Anyways, the point of the matter is, you with confidence are able to hand down traditia, hand down something that you learned maybe from your dad or your grandpa or your uncle, or I don't know what, whether it's something like car mechanics or your hobby or some sports you like, whatever. You can do the same thing with the sacred liturgy. And don't think like, I can never learn liturgy. It's just, no, you don't have to know the whole liturgy. Okay. It's just like anything else in life. Okay. Whatever you're going to hand down to your children are going to appreciate. By the way, especially your sons, but I would even say, by the way,
Yeah.
your daughters. So a perfect example is the father of Saint Therese of Lisieux. Why were there so many vocations from that family? Because guess what the father did? He would
Right.
read to them Dom Guéranger's liturgical year, obviously the French version, to them regularly. This got their minds
Right.
thinking liturgically. Okay. And as an example, what came out of this? Now, I'm not going to say if you go and read Dom Guéranger to your children, suddenly all 10 of your kids become religious, but you get the idea that, look, you don't even have to try to sit down. Okay, guys, I'm going to explain this from what I just learned, and I'm going to do it without any notes. No, you can read to them. It doesn't even have to be your words. It could be someone else's words. But the fact is, when your children see you explaining the liturgy, just like when your children see you on your knees praying,
It
they
sticks.
know it's important and they know it's a manly thing. Too many children out think, oh, piety and liturgy and oh, that's mommy's thing. No. The man with the rosary in his hand, the man with his missal in his hand, the man, um, so Gene, I know you're a huge promoter of that. I'm gonna let you take it from there.
No, it's exactly. It's massively important, and we should be and we should be getting in touch more with our roots, the continuity of tradition. So, yeah, thank you, Lewis. Keep up the great work, and we'll put any links that you have for us in the show notes. I appreciate it.
Great, wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, take care, guys. God bless.